Score, the podcast. The only show taking you inside the studios of the world's most celebrated composers and musical storytellers. Presented by Spitfire Audio.
Back from hibernation, I'm Kenny Holmes.
I'm Robert Kraft, and I'll tell you that 2 weeks was really remarkable for me.
You know, it was actually 3 weeks. It was
it
2
3 weeks?
Wednesdays, but it was 3 weeks.
3 weeks. I knew I got confused because you'd think that being here in lockdown, there'd be a huge difference between 2 weeks and 3 weeks. But actually, the biggest difference may be I do change my clothes periodically. And so I feel that was a strong opportunity over
We're all glad.
Our little
glad
hiatus.
To hear that.
Thank you so much. But it's great to be back.
Say hello to Composer Carol.
Hello.
Composer Carol. Hello, Composer Carol. I want to test something. Are you ready? Boo.
Go ahead.
That's it.
E flat.
It's still E flat. Composer Carol clearly spent her 3 weeks practicing her perfect pitch, which you know that you can tap Composer Carol on the shoulder any time of day or night. Not that I would know, but I'm just
Please
saying.
Don't do that.
and sing a pitch, and she will say exactly. Okay, ready?
C for Composer
Thank
Carol.
You. Oh, that's so nice.
Oh, nice.
Let's see. So
we have a very exciting guest on the show today. I know, like many of our guests, we want to get everyone on the show, but this is definitely one of the top A-lister composers of Hollywood right now. He's Alexandre Desplat, two-time Oscar winner, two-time Golden Globe winner. This list of films is insane. The opus here. He's got a new film coming out with Wes Anderson, who's his partner in crime, The French Dispatch, which we don't know when it's coming out. It was pushed to October, then it was announced that it's kind of up in the air, so we'll see when it comes out. We don't know, but the trailer looks awesome. He's also working on a new Pinocchio with Guillermo Del Toro, which he won. That was the big winner at the Oscars a couple years ago for Shape of Water.
Yep.
So they're back working together again. The Midnight Sky, The Grand Budapest Hotel, The Imitation Game, the two of the Harry Potter films, the Deathly Hallows 1 and 2, Carol's favorite scores for Alexandre Desplat. Isle of Dogs, one of my favorite scores, awesome. And Little Women, Secret Life of Pets, Argo. I mean, the list goes on and on. Fantastic Mr. Fox, which you guys worked together on, we'll talk about.
Yeah, and one of my favorites.
So many to get to. I mean, we could do a 5-hour episode with Alexandre, so it's going to be hard to squeeze everything in. So if we don't get to your favorite score with him, we promise to try to have him on again. But we're going to break down some of his best stuff and talk about his path from composing French films and his transition to Hollywood. So we're going to get to Alexandre in just a bit. First, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Spitfire Audio, maker of orchestral virtual instruments for film composers, used by many of the guests right here on the show.
Yeah, I think that a lot of them probably used the Spitfire Libraries to compose their Emmy-nominated scores. In fact, that could be a subcategory of our Emmy nominations coming up, because Spitfire has something for everyone. If you're just starting out, they have the completely free range of top-quality instruments called Labs.
Yeah, you can just download them. There's a bunch of different ones.
Black Labs, Blonde Labs, Brown Labs. They have Labradoodles. Maybe not. But the new Discovery edition of the BBC Symphony Orchestra, which I got for free, it's $49, but you can get it for free by filling out a survey that's on their website, and just wait 2 weeks. It's a full orchestra at your fingertips.
I got mine too over the break, been tooling around with it. And the most important thing to our listeners is our deal for you. 20% off your first purchase of Spitfire products, including their collaboration packages with Hans Zimmer, Olafur Arnold's Emmy nominee, by the way. We'll get to that in just a bit. And the London Contemporary Orchestra. Over 50 different libraries. You can use our promo code. It's SCORE 2020, SCORE, all lowercase, 2020. And again, it's a limited time offer, so be sure to use the promo code SCORE 2020 so you can elevate your music. And stick around after today's interview with Alexandre Desplat. We'll play a cue, created using the British Drama Toolkit.
Ooh, and I think we have to now segue to the Hollywood Drama Toolkit, because the Hollywood Drama Toolkit
I like that one. That was a good one.
Nice, thanks. And we have to see who is nominated for Emmys. I do want to say that among these Emmy nominees from the announcement just hours ago, it's hard not to draw a very, very fine line between appearing on Score, the podcast, and then, I'm just saying, marching right onto the award stage, because you look down these nominees and a lot of them are very good friends of this program and have appeared. Kenny, you want to kick it off with that first category and tell us?
Yeah, let's
should
run
we
through
bring on
real
down?
quick. Let's start with the Outstanding Music Composition for Limited Series, Movie, or Special for Original Dramatic Score. Former guest of the show, Nathan Barr, for his show Hollywood.
Yep.
Little Fires Everywhere.
By our great friend Mark Isham.
And Isabella Summers. Mrs. America, Chris Bowers,
Knocking
a
it
two-time
out of the
guest
park.
on the show.
Chris Bowers.
And he did half of that show in quarantine, so extra kudos to Chris for that one. Unorthodox Part 1, Antonio Gambale.
Yeah, great show and a great score. And then Watchmen, of course, with Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, just crushing it.
Next category, Outstanding Music Composition for a Series, Original Dramatic Score. Labyrinth for Euphoria, which is a really cool score. Ozark by Danny Bensi and Sandor Jurians.
Yeah, so cool.
Succession, Nicholas Britell.
Respect.
Of course, respect.
The Crown, Martin Phipps, and The Mandalorian, Ludwig Göransson, who's just on a tear.
We could start handicapping these, but I think we're just going to say it's an honor to be nominated in any of these categories, and some of these guests, we love them. We love their work. How about Outstanding Music Composition for a Documentary Series or Special? There's an Original Dramatic Score award for that. Kenny, who do we have as contestants in this category?
For Becoming, we have Kamasi Washington.
Isn't that cool? That was the Michelle Obama doc, and Kamasi is, just great contemporary musician.
Yep. For Home, we have Amanda Jones.
Mm-hmm.
For McMillions, we have a score alum in Pinar Toprak and Alex Kovacs.
Exactly.
Which that docuseries was awesome.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I mean, I think I had heard about that McDonald's scam, but they did a great job. And the music was so cool.
Yeah.
She did a great job at that. Tiger King, which I think, is this the only Emmy nomination Tiger King got?
Because that's so funny.
The music should be the only thing celebrated in that show, I think. But Mark Mothersbaugh, another alum of the show, along with John Enroth and Albert Fox.
They got Albert Fox in there just for his name because they're going to do Fox King next. Go ahead.
And Laura Cartman for the Why We Hate score.
Oh, we love Laura. That's so great.
Let's move it on to original main title theme music, which Nathan Barr, shout out, he has 2 of the nominations for this.
Nathan Barr is up against himself.
Yeah, they're battling it out right now next to the Wurlitzer. There's 2 Nathan Barrs fighting over it. He's up for Carnival Row and Hollywood. Carnival Row, the Amazon Prime series, and Hollywood on Netflix. Oliver Arnold's defending Jacob.
I bet he's using a Spitfire library on that.
I mean, he's probably using his own Spitfire library. Unorthodox, Antonio Gambale. Why We Hate, Laura Cartman, also killing it. And the RZA for the Wu-Tang, An American Saga.
Isn't that amazing? Of course, and that was, by the way, the Wu-Tang series. So cool. I loved it. I learned about Wu-Tang. I learned about RZA.
Staten Island, Brooklyn.
It was so Staten Island. And as many of our score listeners know, I had the opportunity to work with Wu-Tang on...
What? Wait a second.
Yeah. Well, I did a whole thing with them on Ghetto Superstar, where Old Dirty Bastard came in and did the centerpiece of the record. He rapped in the beginning. It's hopes and dreams. And RZA and Method Man.
Are you sure it's Old Dirty Bastard? That might be Old Dirty
ODB.
Kraft.
No, yeah, well, it was
ODK?
a toss-up. But Method
I didn't know
Man,
that. This is why I love doing the shows, because I learned just as much from you.
that was
what
an
you've done.
amazing night doing Ghetto Superstar. And
We need to talk more about this later.
RZA came and Method Man came, and it was incredible. And someday, when you get a little older, I'll tell you what really happened that night. How about outstanding original music and lyrics? That's a great category. My favorite songs. And, ooh, you know what? No score alums, but some. Oh,
Yes,
there's
one.
one score alum.
One score alum, Sid Hartha Khosla and Taylor
Yeah.
Goldsmith for This Is Us.
That's right. And so
Happy
we
to
had
see
Siddhartha
that.
play songs on the show. I want to give a shout out to some of the other nominees, particularly my friend Ingrid Michaelson, who did Little Fires Everywhere, the song Find a Way. Actually, the song was called Build It Up from the episode Find a Way. And in Black Godfather, produced by my wonderful classmate and friend Reggie Hudlin, Pharrell and Chad, formerly known as the Neptunes, did the song Letter to My Godfather. So that's a big one. I also...
And Trenton Atticus had another one
Trenton Atticus, of
for
course.
Watchmen.
For Watchmen. I want to give one quick shout out to the music supervisors who do an unrecognized, brilliant job in so many of these shows. Support your local music supervisor is all I can tell you, because they often don't get credit. Thanks to the Guild of Music Supervisors, they now are a category in the Emmys, which is great. Liza Richardson, who did Watchmen, and Nora Felder, who did Stranger Things, Keira Lehman, who did Insecure. I mean, these are great. Thomas Golubic, who did Better Call Saul, Jen Malone, Adam Liebert. These are great creative minds, but I want to give my number one shout out to Robin Erdang, who does The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. Crushes it, does an amazing job, and Robin, we love you. How about extend? I like this category a lot. Outstanding music direction, because again, some of my favorite musicians are in there, including my great pal Ricky Minor, another unheralded genius, competing with himself for the Kennedy Center honors, and also the Oscars. You know, I think I'll just do the music direction for the entire Oscar show.
I love how you can win an Emmy for the Oscars.
Oh, that's funny. You're right. That's so nice. For Saturday Night Live, Lenny Pickett, the great alto sax player, and Leon Pendarvis, great keyboard player.
How
They
has
got it.
Lenny Pickett not gotten a Emmy nomination for supporting actor? Because he's always in the background laughing in the monologues.
Yeah, you're right. And he's just, I don't know if he gets the credit for being such a great player.
Oh, he's amazing.
But the Grammy salute to Prince is actually up for an award with Sheila E., Jimmy Jam, and Terry Lewis. I mean, these are great categories, great musicians. I'm excited to just hear, you know, they're all winners to me because they are all extraordinary beings.
I do want to give one other quick shout out to Peter Bovietz, who was our sound mixer on Score, a film music documentary. And also he is the sound designer and mixer for Blockbuster, Matt Schrader's podcast series. He got an Emmy nomination for his mixing on the show Modern Family. So congrats to Peter as well. Very exciting. Not sure how they're going to do the Emmys. Is it going to be a show? I don't think we really know. I mean, it'll be televised in some fashion, but I don't know if they'll have an audience or what it'll look like. But definitely excited to see what's to come. And how about The Mandalorian getting a nod for Best Dramatic Series in the Primetime Emmys? I mean, that was a shock.
Amazing. And I would stay far away from that if I was in that category, because that's going to come and eat your lunch. Mandalorian's going to be a big winner at this year's Emmys.
It was a good series. And again, shout out to Ludwig, who we'd love to get on the show.
Wouldn't that be great if we could get Ludwig?
Speaking of Ludwig, Tenet has a new, as we continue Tenet watch, every week I think we have a new update for this film. But they've updated the rollout plan. It's going to open internationally before domestically. In over 70 countries starting August 26th, including Canada on August 27th. And then the U.S. release is planned to begin September 3rd in select cities. And they're going to use that weekend to capitalize on the long Labor Day weekend. But unclear which cities. It's going to be based on what's happening with the regulations at that time. And we'll kind of just go from there. But so it's now September in the United States. There's a billboard right over by Universal Studios where I go to and from work every day. And the billboard has they might as well just get a digital sign for the date because it keeps changing. I can't imagine how much that billboard has cost them. I know. It's like Tenet, and then in the corner there's it's like when you have whiteout covering something and then written over the top of it.
Oh, that's funny. Well, Ludwig scores that, and like everything he does, I'm sure it will be amazing and an amazing movie. And I'm going to see the minute they publish the list of cities, if Robert Kraft's living room is one of the cities it's planning to come to, because that will be a wonderful place, even though I want to see it on a big screen. So we'll see.
IMAX, it's Chris Nolan, man.
And there was some big news this week in the Daytime Emmys, where our good friend Alan Menken, who we all know from the great Disney movies that he's done, he got his EGOT status. EGOT is Emmy, Grammy, Oscar, Tony. So you have now composed music for television, for records and radio, that's the Grammy, for movies, that's Oscars, and Tonys, that's the Broadway stage. And Alan Menken, congratulations to you. The Emmy this time was for the Rapunzel Tangled adventure. And that makes 8 Oscars and 11 Grammys for songs and scores from Disney hits The Little Mermaid, thank you, Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and Pocahontas, and a Tony Award for Newsies, which was a wonderful movie, and then it moved to Broadway, and he got the Tony. So congratulations to Alan Menken.
Yeah, and you guys did Little Mermaid together.
Yep, we worked together on Little Mermaid. It was myself and Alan Menken and the great Howard Ashman.
Which there's a Disney Plus docuseries or documentary coming out, I think, next week about Howard Ashman. And some of the footage they showed in the trailer looks really cool. It's like the behind the scenes. I love when you watch animated behind the scenes stuff and you see them in the booth and how the actors and the singers are, being the characters, but you've never seen who the real people are and they're singing. And I'm excited to watch that.
Oh, I am too. And I had the pleasure of recording actors and singers with Howard in the room with a pencil and a notepad. And you'd finish a take and he'd say, wait, I got a better one. And he, on the spot, would write a new verse. He was really a certifiable genius. And the new verse was better than the 4 verses you had just recorded and go back in and do it again. I saw him do it time and time again. Really an incredible mind and creative person.
Well, that'll be great. And congrats to Alan Menken again, hitting EGOT status, the 16th person to achieve that title. We're going to get to Alexandre Desplat in just a moment, but of course, before we do, we have a message in our score, the mailbox. This is from Stum and Lout. Stum and Lout writes, your episode with Teddy Shapiro got me all fired up to go through his works again, but that's easier said than done. I'd really like to buy the scores for Old School and Dodgeball, but I can't find them anywhere online. He goes on to say that he once reached out to a composer. I'm not going to say who the composer was because the composer probably shouldn't have done this. But he got an unreleased score from a composer that he was a fan of that never got released. And he was wondering, why don't all scores get released? And I felt like, Robert, you probably have been in this situation quite a bit. Why don't all scores get released?
Well, it's a fantastic question, and Stum and Laut, I don't know if you can imagine the answer has to do with, we should have a little drum roll, money. So, first, there we go. That was sort of a drum roll.
Thank you.
So the hardest part about releasing a score is simply that you have to do something called reuse. Reuse is when you use something that's been paid for example, union musicians recording, which is what you always have on a movie score, and then you want to reuse it in a different medium, like a record. You have to pay them again. If you have a score that costs a certain amount of money, sometimes tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you want to reuse it, you have to pay that money again, or a portion of it. And not every studio or film producer wants to do that. Why would they do that? Are they going to get that money back from record sales? So it's simple math, and it's often a big decision. Hey, let's see, the dodgeball score. Is anybody going to go and buy a dodgeball score? Yeah. There's a small, devoted group of fans of Teddy's and of that movie that will get it. But that amount of money that is generated by releasing the score, is that going to make up what we have to pay already in front to the union to release it? And the answer, unfortunately, is often not entirely clear, so the scores don't get released.
So there's royalties, but there's also an upfront fee that, like, if you can't clear that fee, what's the point?
Exactly. So
on top of that, if they can clear that first hurdle, then it's just a percentage of whatever they sell. It's not upfront.
Yes, and as you can imagine, when you have an enormous orchestra playing, 90 players, and somebody wants the score album, and the studio is, all fired up to promote the movie, sometimes they have to say, we're going to bite the bullet. We're going to spend what could be hundreds of thousands of dollars in reuse to release this score album, because maybe we'll buy it back, but it's a good thing to have in the marketplace. It's good marketing. Maybe it's going to make a top composer love us more. So there's a lot of calculation to releasing a score album.
So let me ask you this. As we move into this like streaming age, and the cost of printing and putting copies of CDs on the shelves, which may or may not sell, that stuff is kind of out the window now. Is it more likely that scores will get released without that part of it, that the fact that it can just get put on a streaming service and people can listen to it? Or does that mean less revenues coming in because it's just on a streaming platform?
Very fine questions, and part of the answers included in your answer, but the musicians aren't getting paid any less. So whether it comes out streaming, or it comes out on a CD, or it comes out in a box set, you still have to pay the reuse. Now, the AF&M, the American Federation of Musicians, may now be looking at, or may even have, new deals that say streaming only and a reduced fee, which I'm going to have to get back to you on that, because I'm fond of saying when I don't know the answer. But you still have to reuse. You're reusing the music. The music was recorded for one purpose, to be in the movie. You want to reuse it to be on a record or stream it, somebody has to get paid again. That's part of the genius of some of the deals that were made many years ago to compensate musicians for their work.
So in short, just like Stum and Laut did, just track down your favorite composer's email and beg them for the unreleased pirated bootleg tracks from the film, I think is the answer.
And just say, I did not hear this from Score the Podcast.
Great question from Stum and Laut. Thanks for that question. If you have a question for us, send it to scorethemailbox at epicleff.com. That's EPICLEFF.com. And you might hear your question answered right here on the show. we are going to take a quick break, and then I think we're going to come back with the Oscar-winning maestro of the upcoming film, The French Dispatch. Alexandre Desplat's joining us from Paris, France. We'll be right back.
Blockbuster, the winner of Adweek's Creative Podcast of the Year, returns.
Film is a hobby, not a career.
I know, Dad.
James Cameron? James Cameron.
A movie for your ears.
James Cameron. What, me? No.
This isn't what I envisioned.
That's a bad idea, okay?
About the world's most ambitious filmmaker.
It has to be perfect.
Just say, I'm the king of the world.
What? Why would I yell that?
Blockbuster. Get it wherever you get your podcasts.
Hi, this is Nathan Barr. You're listening to Score the Podcast, and now back to the show.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast, presented by Spitfire Audio. Another week, another guest overseas. It's been the international season of Score the Podcast, and we're very excited for our guest today. Two-time Oscar-winning composer, two-time Golden Globe-winning composer for amazing films like Shape of Water, Grand Budapest Hotel, Painted Veil. He also has a new film coming up with Wes Anderson, The French Dispatch. And he's also the guest of honor at this year's World Soundtrack Awards. Please welcome Alexandre Desplat to the show.
Alexandre, I'm surprised that Wes didn't name it The French Desplat. Why did he call it The French Dispatch? You couldn't work on that?
Yeah, I think I came in too late on the project, I guess.
No, maybe that's your biopic. That's the one they're going to do. You know, like the George Gershwin movie. They'll do one about you. The French Desplat.
We do a musical like In Misbehaving, you know?
Oh, yeah. You know, it's fun to even talk about the Wes Anderson pictures because one of my favorite scores, and among many, is Fantastic Mr. Fox. I lived for about 6 months on one cue called High Speed Train. And I always thought High Speed Train was your personality in a piece of music because it's funny and it also has a kind of, that little release has a kind of bittersweet quality, a little melancholy. So it's kind of a sweet, kind of reflective bit, and then it comes back to fun. And I always thought that cue, that's your biography in a cue. Does Wes Anderson come to you with an idea? Here's the kind of instrumentation. Here's the feel I want. Or does he leave it up to you?
I must say that Mr. Fox was really up to me. It's evolved through the years where he mentions now an era or a location, and I try to put together with him an instrumentarium. But for Mr. Fox, when I saw, some snippets of the film for the first time, these puppets were so pretty, so beautiful, so cute, that the desire that they had of having a big orchestral score seemed just wrong to me. And I thought that the music should be of the same level, which means a small chamber orchestra and with little instruments. So that's where we went.
Does it take you a while to get to that conclusion? How long does it take you to realize, was it immediate, or did you try orchestral, big sweeping stuff first and then realize this isn't working?
No, it always starts with some kind of a intellectual, instinctive reaction to what I see. It's something that I quickly try to analyze. I might be wrong, but at least have a concept.
Yes, it's a place to start. I know that I read that on this one, The French Desplat, which I'm going to call it forever, that Dada was mentioned, and I thought, that's my favorite. I used to go visit Man Ray on Rue Ferrou, right near your studios in Jardin, Luxembourg. So, but I thought, a Dada score, what is that like? Do you take instruments and drop them downstairs?
Well, that's what I said to Wes when I read the script, that his script was Dada, which is just before the surrealists start the movement, and I think it's more the way the unpredictable, the disconnection between the chords or the melody lines create some disorder, Dada-like disorder, or an orderly disorder, but
orderly disorder. And surrealism took it to the next step with dream disorder. But I love that. I can't wait to hear it. French Dispatch. I think you were going to play it at Cannes, and it's been moved. Do you know when we can see the film?
No, I don't know. I heard there was a time where it was meant to be released in October, but I don't know now what will be happening. I don't know how much the theaters will be able to open.
A lot of times with scores, it's kind of a race to the release date for the composer. You're the last person to put your stamp on the film. But with this case, the movie's done and it's sitting there. Do you have any thoughts of like, man, I've got time. Can I go back in and do something? Or do you just call it done and move on?
No, unless I receive a phone call from the director or the producer, I run.
I bet you.
I ran to the next project.
You know, one thing that's always interested me, because I first heard your name the way and on the film that a lot of people did, which was Girl with the Pearl Earring. And I know that you had been a celebrated French composer before that, but I wondered, during those 50 French films, was your dream to go to Hollywood and you were hoping someone would hear you and bring you in, or was that an accident?
I think that secretly it was always a dream of becoming a Hollywood composer, yes. And many of my friends tell me now that I did mention it. I can't remember mentioning it, or realizing it. But I know that I was dreaming of that because the scores that impressed me the most were from whether French composers who had flown to Hollywood, like Delerue, or Maurice Jarre, even Michel Legrand, or Hollywood composers like Herman, Waxman, and Goldsmith, and Williams, and even Nino Rota, who's maybe my favorite Italian composer for cinema. Even Nino Rota, actually, he did The Godfather. So, yes, there was something about American cinema that was capturing my attention since I was a child. Don't forget that my parents were students in Berkeley, California in the 50s. And they both spoke English together because my mother was Greek and my father was French. So it was their secret language. So as a child, I would hear as much English as Greek or French in the house. And they had many records. And in these records, there were many soundtracks. So as a child, I'm sure there's a very strong subconscious push for me to go to America.
Was there a score in that in that collection that stood out to you? A film score or a soundtrack?
Picnic, Cowboy, George Dunning. Yeah.
And it's just wonderful. You not only came to Hollywood, you conquered. You came to Hollywood, and I remember watching it, Girl with the Pearl Earring, then Birth, and then I was surprised when you did Hostage. I thought, oh, his action, he's everything. You really just sort of took it all on. It was kind of incredible, the list of films that you ended up with. The Guillermo Del Toro, how did you first meet him, and where was that?
Well, he was the co-producer on an animation at DreamWorks called The Rise of the Guardians. And so I met him at a screening, and we just had a little chat, and he called me a couple of years later about this project he had about a fish.
Yes. All right.
Until I got a script, and that was maybe 3 years later after meeting with Guillermo.
But did you have, in that situation, we were talking earlier about temp scores, for some reason, I believe I read that you saw Shape of Water with no music? Or did he have music? So you had to invent it from the beginning?
But I was lucky enough to be introduced in Hollywood by two persons that you know very well. Laura Engel, of course.
Yep.
But before Laura Engel was Robert Urband, who was my manager.
That's right.
That you know very well. And he took me around and he gave me some advices. And he knew that there were some films that I was not ready to do. You mentioned Firewall as an action movie, but when I started, he kept saying to me, "No, don't go near an action movie yet. You're not ready. You can't do a big movie. You're not yet. Take your time." And he was right. He could feel that I was still in my, post Nouvelle Vague mood and technique, and I was not yet strong enough in both ways, technically. Diplomacy, mind, everything, nerves.
That is unbelievable. Nerves. It's unbelievable that a manager or an advisor would have that kind of instinct, because he's saying you could get hurt by doing this big picture.
Yeah, but the great thing about Robert Urban, he was looking at the long run. He was not looking for, a shortcut. He wanted me to become a composer in Hollywood, not to just be the flavor of the day.
Yeah.
And he was fabulous about, he helped a lot.
How was it different coming to Hollywood after doing so many French films? Was there a different feel to it? Was the approach different just from what directors were looking for in your eyes?
Everything is different. Everything is different, from the relationship between the composer and the director, and the composer and the producer. In France, it's the director who's leading everything. It's not the producer. Of course, you listen to him and you're polite, but it's the director who decides of everything. He has the final cut. In America, there are many voices that you need to hear. Doesn't mean they're right, but you have to understand what they are talking about and translate it into the score you're writing. There's also the technology, the resources, all these things that are given to a composer in America to create a score. In France, there's a very, very little amount of time and money allowed to a composer to create what he has to create. And thirdly, the films, they don't have these huge, epic options that American cinema always had. There are very, very little movies in France or in Europe that can, challenge an American epic movie, and therefore the score. So French movies have a lot of dialogue, a lot of people in a room or people in a bar
smoking cigarettes.
Yes, two boys and a girl, two girls and a boy, and so it's a different approach.
I learned something from French composers and European composers that surprised me. I, coming up in America, was used to composers who were very cuey. I don't know, you wrote to the cue in the specific moment. And I started to work. I remember I was taught it by a Polish composer. What he wanted to do was go away from the movie and write themes that worked. And the first day of scoring was not to picture. He played for the director, Adrian Lin, maybe 3 themes to say, these are the themes I feel, and I'll then adapt them to the film. I'd never seen that before. Were you more in this? Did you have to adapt to being cuey in a way, if that's the right word, for American films?
No, I would say differently. I would say that I like movies which are character driven, and I like to respect the actors, and I like to leave to the dialogue the room that it needs, and I don't like to underline everything that's on the screen. On that level, I belong to the post-Nouvelle Vague composers like Maurice Jarre or Delerue, or even Herman, because when you listen to Herman's scores, he doesn't underline every movement on the screen. And there's not music wall to wall. The music is the soul of the film, and it's vibrating with the actors, with the camera moves, and that's, with the light, and that's what I like to do. So which means that I do want to see the film, and I want to write to the film. Each composer has his own way of being inspired. I'm inspired by the images and by the actors and their voices, and I need to watch the film. I need to see. I need to chew the picture until it's in my blood, and then I can create something that belongs to the film without mimicking what is on the screen.
And we know you're a flute player, but I'm wondering your...
No, I'm a very good flute player.
Oh.
You're an amazing flute player.
Thank you.
But what is your weapon of choice when you're writing? What's your process? Do you use a flute? Do you use a piano? I mean, how do you approach when you first start to write? And is it by hand or by computer?
Writing is not playing. Composing is not playing. Improvising, yes, it's playing, but composing is not playing. I don't have that approach. When we were talking about Mr. Fox earlier and the concept of Mr. Fox, it's very important for me to find these concepts. It can be the instrumentarium, it can be the key that I'm going to use, in which key I'm going to work. Is it D major because it's bright? Is it E flat minor for whatever reason? Or is it E flat minor because the movie is very sunny and bright and I want to shade it, dim the light? I don't know. There's the tempo. Jerry Goldsmith was genius at choosing the right tempo. So what's the tempo of the film? What's the tempo of this important scene in the film? When I have answers to all these questions, I hear chords, I hear melodies, I hear things, and I write on notebooks, big notebooks, pages and pages and pages and pages of notes. It can be a chord, it can be a few bars of a melody line. I'm not a pianist, but I can use the piano, of course. But so I use the piano when I need to look for chord changes that I want to explore. For many years, when I was a French composer, before being a Hollywood composer, I would write everything on paper. But as you know, the schedules in Hollywood are crazy, and you can't do that unless you're John Williams and you have that incredible speed. So I do extreme precise orchestration on Digital Performer of all the cues. Each cue is orchestrated on Digital Performer. And then my team of orchestrator comes in and submits to me what they've done, and I correct, and we together we do the final touch.
I'm interested in and would love to have a lesson about what you said about Jerry Goldsmith. I've never thought of that or heard it, that he was a genius at tempo. That's so subtle, and only a composer in some ways would be able to determine that. Is there any example that we should look at of a film or a cue or how that's affected you? Yes.
Easy.
I'd like to learn.
Easy. Basic Instinct. That's an easy film to find. Listen to the melody and the tempo of the melody when they're driving on the Corniche, going to the house at the beginning of the film. That's all. It's perfect.
Oh, that's great. It's my next stop, because it's something that's probably not acknowledged enough by audiences. Of all the subtlety of film music that affects an audience, the tempo, you just accept it. That's obviously the tempo that's the correct tempo.
When you were mentioning Birth earlier, and when I wrote Birth, I chose one key, which is the key of D major, for all the film. And at the very end of the film, there's this very sad moment when Nicole Kidman gets married, and we see her in the waves of a sea, of an ocean, and we drop down to the minor relative of D major, which is B minor. And so that's a way of keeping the concept to the end. As tempo, there's a French movie called Read My Lips, Sur mes lèvres, by Jacques Audiard, who did A Prophet. Maybe you've heard of that movie, or Sisters, Brothers. And that movie, because I wanted the score to be, it's two stories. It's at the same time a love story and a thriller, and I didn't want the music to be different. So I kept the same tempo from A to Z of the film. It's the same tempo from beginning to the end. It's 80 BPM. But 80, you can go to 160. So when you need acceleration, you just double the time.
Yeah.
And that was a way of keeping the same pulsation all through the film.
I wonder if the filmmakers ever felt it, knew it, or said to you, hey man, aren't you going to change the tempo? Or are we all in the same key the entire movie? Don't you want to leave the key of D at some point? Or do you just do your job and they say we like it or we don't, but never ask you specifics?
No, I don't. I'm in the kitchen for that.
I must say composer Carol, who is here with us, has perfect pitch. So I just watch her. I watch her when you say D and B minor, and I know for a fact that she is singing those pitches in her head and imagining how they go and relative minors.
And for Birth, Jonathan Glazer and Peter Rayburn, who were director and producer for the music when I was writing this score, they love this idea of having just one key. But D major, but there's so many chords on top of D major that sometimes you don't really know in which key you are. But D is the guide.
It's a bright key.
Yes.
It's that F sharp that makes it kind of sparkle.
So you were doing the French films and knocking it out of the park. And then at what point did you get a call, or how did you end up getting your first Hollywood gig? And did you see, was it out of nowhere, or was it kind of something that was building and you finally got an opportunity?
Well, I had done a few British movies, and one of them was The Luz in Defense by Oscar winner Marlene Goris, Dutch director, where for the first time I used the LSO, and I was able to write a very lyrical score, quirky at times, but lyrical. And I know that it was heard by a few people. And 1 or 2 years later, I wrote this score for this movie I just mentioned at 80 BPM, Sur mes lèvres, Read My Lips, and by Jacques Audiard. And Peter Weber was looking for a composer. And for some reason, he couldn't find, because each time he was asking for a composer for Girl with a Pearl Earring, the people he would meet would suggest to write a period music. And when I saw the film, I said, no, it would be horrible to have period music. We don't need that. It exists already. We need to find something else. And he found me by watching and listening to the score of Read My Lips, who was produced by Pathé, the same studio.
Did he come to you and say, do you know any other tempos besides 80 ppm just before I hire you?
You know what he liked in Sur mes lèvres was not only the tempo, but it's the silence, because there are it's about a deaf woman who's in love with a bad guy, with a villain and a gangster, and there were many moments where the music would stop, like Jerry Goldsmith does in Chinatown, actually, where the chords would decay, stop, start again, decay, start again. And he liked the idea that I could respect the silence and use the silence in my tempo, and not just, paint the whole film with music.
The Hollywood way. That would be, have you scored 2 films with a deaf protagonist? Because Shape of Water, isn't that young lady?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's, I listened to Shape of Water and I thought for sure, but I couldn't find it anywhere in the notes that you used, those water glasses. They do them. There was a guy in who would, Air Lyndhurst, he'd come out onto the floor with a whole tray of water glasses and do that thing where he'd rub his finger around
the crystal.
Different glass. Right, crystal. It always felt like in Shape of Water, but I think it might be a flute now that I think of it.
Well, actually, just to correct what you just said, in Shape of Water, she's a mute.
Oh, she
can hear.
Yes. I was close.
And yes, almost.
It was almost, yes.
And Girl with the Pearl Earring, she never spoke. He was some kind of a mute too. She never said a word through the film, Scarlett.
So you have, that's very interesting. 2 mutes and a deaf person, and the scores have been transcendent. But I read also that for the Guillermo Del Toro Pinocchio, you're writing songs.
Yes. Yes, I have written a lot of songs here in Europe, in France.
Before you were scoring films, you were a songwriter? Or
no,
while?
But I was a composer.
Yes, sure.
That's it. And sometimes I would write songs, and sometimes I would write for short movies or anything else. But aside from this movie I mentioned, Right of the Guardians, where I wrote a song for René Fleming, I never really had an opportunity in America to write songs for a film. And Guillermo gave me that opportunity for Pinocchio. Yes, so we wrote 7 or 8 songs for the film. We just recorded yesterday some vocal overseas, and it's very exciting. I love writing songs.
Actors as singers?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Ewan McGregor, yeah.
Oh well, we did Moulin Rouge. He's a great singer.
He's a fantastic singer.
Very good.
Do you sing?
Do I sing? If I sing, yes, if I need to.
You'll be in it. You'll be a voice. It's interesting. You said, almost as an aside, you love writing songs. That's not always the case. Speaking of Robert Urband, I did a lot with Michael Kamen, and he occasionally was asked to write a song, and it was the exact opposite problem that songwriters have who are asked to be composers. They don't understand that the composing form is very different, and that songwriting is a very specific AABA, whatever your structure is of a song. Kamen would write these songs that were amazing songs, but they didn't sound like songs. They sounded like cues with lyrics. So your songs, they're 4 characters to sing on screen?
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
So it's a musical.
Like it is. It is. The thing is that, as I mentioned before, because my childhood was a mix of many musical influences, the American songbook has always been very present in my house, from Duke Ellington to Gershwin to Cole Porter, and all the many others. And so I've also been a great jazz fan and jazz player. So all the standards, most of the standards in the 30s, 40s were coming from musicals, from this composer, Gershwin or Porter or Ellington. And when you play these tunes, they're incredible tunes, but also incredible chord changes. Yes, I was listening yesterday by pure accident, to a Duke Ellington piece in Portrait of a Lady. It's a portrait of Ella Fitzgerald, an album he did with Ella Fitzgerald and for Ella Fitzgerald. And there's a piece called All Heart. Man, the chord progression, the melody, the arrangements, it's just to die for. And I've been listening to this kind of music since I'm a kid. So it's also in my DNA to to try and write a standard. Let's put it that way.
That's so wonderful. I mean, you're talking my language, of course. I was just looking before we started today. There's a new documentary on Ella. And I'm looking forward. And it's interesting because, as many of our listeners know, jazz comes out of that music. I mean, the bebop era is, Charlie Parker and Dizzy and Miles playing the changes, but making new melodies. Ella's How High the Moon and Ornithology. The same changes. Charlie Parker takes Ornithology, is somewhere there's music, how high the moon, I mean, I love those changes to death. And it's interesting because a lot of composers they appreciate it, but they're not as enamored of it. They've come up so profoundly in Mahler and in Brahms, and they don't know the American Songbook, which is one of my favorites.
Well, I suspect that John Williams does, that Dave Grusin does, that Henry Mancini did.
Oh,
yes. You know what I mean?
You're
Franz
so right.
Waxman also. So that,
Yeah. Well, those are the complete composers.
Hey, we have a lot more to get to. We're going to take a quick break. Much more with Alexandre Desplat right after this.
Hey there, fans of Score the Podcast. I'm David W. Collins, creator and host of The Soundtrack Show for iHeartRadio. Like you, I love Score the Podcast, and The Soundtrack Show is the perfect complement if you're passionate about music for film, TV, even video games and theater. Each week, I do a deep dive into some of the greatest scores of all time, as well as some fan favorites, and talk about why the music moves us from a character and story point of view. We also learn fascinating behind-the-scenes stories and share the history and background that brought each piece of music to life. It doesn't matter if you're a musician or not. Music is a language that we all understand. And through our love of movies like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Back to the Future, or even classics like Casablanca or Psycho, we can gain a deeper appreciation for how composers are speaking to us through music, explaining why we have such a powerful reaction to the images on screen. The Soundtrack Show is available on Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio app, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Hey, Score fans, it's Kenny. We are stoked to be back for Season 3, and we couldn't have done it without your support. Be sure to connect with us on social media for the latest guest announcements, video clips, industry news, and more. You can find us on all the social platforms. Twitter is @ScoreThePodcast, Instagram @ScoreMovie, and Facebook @ScoreMovie, or you can just search Score, a film music documentary. Also, please remember to click subscribe on your podcast app, and if you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a short review. It helps more people discover the show. All right, enough business. Let's get back to it.
Hi, this is Marco Beltrami. You're listening to Score, the podcast. And now, let's get back to the show.
Welcome back to Score the Podcast, presented by Spitfire Audio. We're here with our Oscar and Golden Globe winning composer guest, Alexandre Desplat, who, by the way, again, I'll mention, is the guest of honor at this year's World Soundtrack Awards, which is going to be taking place online. Obviously, there's no plans to do it in person on October 24th. I wanted to ask you, because you talked about how you made the transition to Hollywood, but you still live in Paris. Do you work out of Hollywood when you're working on films, or do directors come visit you, or do you do everything remotely? Because that can pose a challenge if someone wants to see you right away in person.
I do anything I'm asked to do.
That's the right answer.
That's the right answer, yeah.
And they like to know that. It's sometimes difficult when it's two different continents and 9 hours apart for a director, but I would imagine at this point in your career, you've earned the right to write. You've earned the right, R-I-G-H-T, to write, W-R-I-T-E, where it's best for you.
Well, I've been very lucky to have also directors who are very faithful and call me back, and after, movies after movies. So there is some kind of a routine now between us. If they're in LA, I'm happy to come to my house in LA and stay there and work with them from my studio in LA. But very often they're happy to come to Paris, believe it or not.
I bet.
Yeah.
So, I love doing it from California. I always try to be in the room at some point with the director. Sometimes it's difficult because he's editing locked somewhere and not even in America, could be in London, or and I can't have a studio in every city. But it's important I think it's important. It's crucial, especially when you don't know the director very well, to be in the same room, because it's not the same. It's like going to the movies or watching a movie at home. It's no total different experience, because the vibration of a person near you is not the same as when you're on your own in front of the computer. Even, it's like if the ideas were floating in the air in the room, and if the director is near me, which I like, because that's why I chose to write music for films. Otherwise, I would only write for concerts, being myself, as an artist. But no, I like to be sharing that with the director and through his vision, try and capture a musical vibration of his vision. So when we're in the same room, of course, there's something quick and immediate. If you send a demo to someone overseas, he hears a huge piece of music orchestrated. And if he doesn't like, I don't know, a line, a carton point, he doesn't like the piece. If he's in my studio, I just can mute that line and it's over. We move on to the next piece, because it's a working process. That's the great thing about electronics today. We can create a demo which is almost as good as what the orchestra will be when we record. And it's been very rare that I come to a recording session with an orchestra and that the director is unhappy, because he's heard everything so carefully before with precision, and we got rid of the trumpet when he didn't like the trumpet on a shot, or
Are you able to work with Guillermo in person right now with Pinocchio, or is everything being done remotely?
No, this is a very special, different moment, of course, these last 3 months. But we did work together before that, yes, last year, and in the fall in Paris, we were sitting together here, and we went through the lyrics, and now we have songs where Guillermo is lyricist with a great friend of mine, Katz, who's also a friend. I wrote songs when I was a French composer, but he's American. So we have been able to sit down, but for the last 4 months, nobody moved.
Everyone is songwriting remotely, and thankfully we now have a technology where you just can send an MP3, you can send a Pro Tools session. I wanted to ask about electronics, because I, over the last few days, have been listening to so many of your scores and just amazed by I'm amazed by your musicality. It's just it feels effortless, which is probably the mark of anybody that works super hard. It just flows effortlessly. I've wondered, though, whether you're so well versed in orchestrating. Do you think about synthetic percussion and synthetic textures? Do you prefer? I mean, it's a dumb question because we all use everything at our disposal, I know, but some composers these days, it's like the orchestra is almost on top of a huge synthetic and programmed track. And I don't feel that. I feel that you still express yourself with humans. I may be fooled. It may be it's the best programming in the world, but what do you think? And what are you thinking these days about electronics in your scores?
Well, electronics are just sounds that I like to use for what they are. I think I'm a symphonist before anything, or a classical composer or a jazz composer, which means that I use, as you said, humans to blow or to scratch an instrument or to hit an instrument. And as long as the electronic I use is part of a whole, and gives me range that I can't get with the orchestra, or an impact that I can't get with an orchestra, I use it. Or a sound which is so unknown or strange that I can use it, and it gives something interesting to the orchestra. But the orchestra remains my main gear.
Your instrument. It must have been joyful to do Secret Life of Pets with just a swinging band. Was it an American recording session with American players?
Yeah, it was fantastic. We are at Capitol. Yeah, we with legends of.
So that's it.
Yes.
The ghosts in the room were swinging with you. Was it
absolutely?
Was it a big band?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, rather big. Yeah. No, it was really 5 saxes and 4 trumpets and 3 trombones, tuba. No, it was piano. Randy Kerber on piano. It was really an amazing time to record this score, and to be able to match, which I've always dreamed of doing, and it's very rare to be able to do it, to match jazz and symphonic orchestra. That's why I love so much these recordings with Ella, the Nelson Riddle orchestration, or the Quincy Jones orchestrations with Sarah Vaughan, where they mix jazz and orchestra, or this fantastic album, Wynton Marsalis's album called Hot House Flowers. That's a trumpet player I would love to record with one day. He's such a fantastic musician. Yeah, this combination of jazz and orchestra is something magical for me.
I was just thinking that maybe is there a trumpet player in Pinocchio that maybe could be cast as Cole Winton and say, listen, we have a gig for you. We're going to play you. I'm sure Wynton Marsalis would kill to be on an Alexandre Desplat score.
Okay, let's wait until he tells me that.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised. He would love that. I know that Carol is a big Harry Potter fan, and we were talking about it and wondering how it was for you to, of course, work on something that John Williams had set the table. Did you ever sit next to John Williams and ask him, how'd I do, boss?
No, I would never dare. I would never dare talk about me with him.
Have you had conversations with him? Had a chance to visit with John Williams?
He's been, yes, of course. He's been very, very, very sweet with me. Very sweet, very kind, always. But no, I would never dare showing him my scores or asking anything about myself.
Right.
I would ask him to help me, to save me, save my soul, and save my score.
Yes.
You mentioned in an interview before that he was one of your inspirations for scoring. I don't want to get too much into the award shows and stuff, but for you to be standing up on the Oscar stage, winning for Grand Budapest and having John Williams in the room, what did that mean to you?
Luckily enough, it had happened before, to be in the same room, because I think we've been nominated 2 or 3 times, whether at the Globes, whether at the Oscars, and I remember him winning for Memoirs of a Geisha of the Golden Globes, and I remember that it's the first time I was able to see him in a room and be able to talk to him. So I remember I had beautiful glasses that I loved very much that night, and I went to his table at the other side of the room. I introduced myself. I said, I came back. I had no more glasses.
You left them?
No, I don't know. I lost them.
You blacked out.
Well, it's clear. It's clear that he wanted to see the world that you do.
Did you go back up to him and say, "Excuse me, Maestro, you seen my glasses?" And maybe strike up another conversation, round 2?
No, what is crazy is that he's lost. He's won 5 times, and he's lost 47 times or something, or 50 times. It's nonsense.
That's silly, but also I bet if you asked Maestro Williams about that, he would be suitably humble and chill about it and say, those scores were so great. I mean, he is really the most generous. But I'd say second to John Williams in generosity, Maestro Desplat.
Oh, that's very sweet of you.
Before we let you go, we lost a great one in Ennio Morricone. And we were just curious if you ever spent time with Maestro Morricone, or you had a story of maybe a score that's a particular favorite of yours.
The first time I met Ennio Morricone, there was a concert in Cannes organized by the SACEM, the French society. It was the first time ever there was a concert of composers in Cannes. There were legends, Randy Newman, Morricone, and many others, and Antoine Duhamel. And I was the kid. I was the baby of them all. And I was the first to go on stage to start the concert. And they were all on the first row. And Morricone, who was like this,
arms crossed,
looking at me just here. It was so horrible, so difficult. And when I came out of the podium after a while, I was able to say, present myself, introduce myself, and he said, he spoke to me in Italian, so we spoke in Italian together, and he said, attenzione, non troppo ostinato. Because the piece that I presented was some kind of a minimalistic piece with a repetitive pattern, evolving, but, with a pattern. And it was funny because if there's one thing that you can really recognize Ennio for, is these ostinatos that he uses a lot, these repetitive patterns that he keeps.
So what was the translation? He was saying too much ostinato? Or?
Yes, that I was using too much ostinato, yes.
Because you were getting onto his territory, that's why. He was saying, hey man, he was saying, this is my, you want to step up to my playing field.
Do you think about that now? And when you're writing scores, you're like, too many ostinatos here. I got to take them.
I always think about it, I must say.
Yeah.
But he invented something that nobody had invented before. And that's just, it's mind blowing what he introduced to cinema, and to cinema, which was an American type of cinema, Westerns. Well, now, we must remember that he did movies before Leone, where the music was very, very explorative. Can you say that?
Yes. Exploratory.
Exploratory, with Pasolini in particular. So what is crazy is the number of scores he wrote. He lived like a monk, and this very quiet, distant man with his big glasses had a brain full of fireworks, and that's something that also is incredible.
He did something that we're lucky that you don't do. He only spoke in his language. If you did a session with Morricone, there was a translator there. Thankfully, your English is perfect. He would speak only Italian. You kind of had the feeling that he said to the translator, I hate this note that they're giving me. I'm not changing my cue a bit. And then the translator would say something reasonably nice, like, the maestro is not certain.
He's thinking about it.
Yeah, he's thinking about it. But you had the feeling from his stern demeanor. But you knew that he didn't want to make any changes. However.
Well, I think it's cool that, now we're here in present day, and you are one of the legends that a young new class composer can go up to, and you can tell him too many ostinatos.
I wait for that day. That's the day Desplat comes up and says, in French you have to say it. Too many. Plus ostinatos.
When I have large glasses and
big glasses
with my arms like this, yes.
Just don't lose them.
And people, now you said you travel to LA, but for Morricone and someday soon, I hope for you, you only record in Paris. Guillaume Tell. Do you use that studio?
Of course. It's the only one standing anymore.
Yes,
all the other ones have shut down.
So you have to, that's the only place that you'll record. You won't move. Believe me, they will beat a path to your door.
Yeah, can you tell us really quick what's the plan for the French Dispatch? I know it's up in the air, but at the current point, is it going to be a theatrical release? Are they going to go digital? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. You should ask for. You should have Searchlight Pictures. I don't know.
I'm going to ask them. I know those guys. I really don't know. I worked with them on all that stuff.
Well, the trailer looks fantastic. I can't wait to watch it.
Same.
That's for
it's
sure.
It's an incredible movie.
Again, congratulations on the 2020 Guest of Honor at the World Soundtrack Awards. That's taking place October 24th online, so we'll be sure to tune in. They're going to do a live concert and everything. And
thank you.
It's been such a pleasure spending time with you. And again, as so many of our guests, we jump through hoops to get this show going remotely, and we can't thank you enough for the time you took to help get this going, and best of luck with the new film and everything in the future.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Carol. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Kenny.
À tout à l'heure, monsieur.
Alexandre Desplat, thank you so much for coming on the show. A reminder to our listeners that there's a number of ways to follow us. Twitter, @ScoreThePodcast, Instagram, @ScoreMovie, Facebook, Score a Film Music Documentary. Send us your questions to scorethemailbox at epiclef.com. We'll try and answer those, and stick around after the break. At the end of the show here, we're going to play you a little clip from Spitfire Audio so you can hear some different sounds to elevate your music. Robert, take it away, man.
I'm happy in a way that I can't even put into words, so I'm going to just leave this podcast singing a cue, High Speed Train, my favorite. Alexandra, we'll see you. Thank you. And Score listeners, we'll see you next week.
As Ennio would say, ciao.
Hey, Score listeners, we're so grateful for the support of our sponsor, Spitfire Audio. They collaborate with people like Hans Zimmer and the Bernard Herrmann Estate to build sample libraries that elevate your music. And you're about to hear a musical demo of what that sounds like.
Also, an exclusive to Score listeners, Spitfire Audio is offering 20% off your first order. It's such a good deal. That's good on over 50 of their libraries, exclusive to Score the Podcast listeners. Kenny, what's the process they have to go through?
Just go to spitfireaudio.com and enter the promo code SCORE2020, all lowercase, so they know we sent you. Now, here is a musical cue created with one of their packages, the British Drama Toolkit. Again, just go to spitfireaudio.com, use the promo code SCORE2020, and save 20% off your first order from Spitfire products. Thanks so much for listening to the show. And when will we see them again, Robert?
I think we're going to see you in just a week. Yes?
Sounds good.
Yeah, no more breaks for us. We are hard at work, sleeves rolled up. Score the podcast.